Happy birthday to the WWE Network, which turns 6 years old today, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the Ruthless Aggression Show, Episode 3 specifically, focusing on Evolution. First and foremost, obviously, if you have yet to check out the first two episodes, definitely do so. They're great. The first one introduces the Ruthless Aggression era in 2002 upon the closure of WCW. And then the second one focuses on the rise of John Cena from 02 to 07, kind of touching upon how Cena was almost fired early on in his career after the initial debut. Momentum didn't really work out, and he was on the chopping block before he reinvented himself as the Doctor of Thugonomics, and it took off from there. So great stuff there. Check out those two episodes. This third one is the longest one yet. That first one, I think, is about 40 minutes. The Cena one is 50 minutes. This one is an hour and 5 minutes. But it's well worth it because it covers a lot of ground with all four guys, Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, Batista, obviously all four members of the group in great depth, and how they almost added a new member in the absence of Batista in 2003, which a lot of people already know about, but they go into way more depth here than they did in Triple H's, I think it was Triple H's DVD, that they talked about how they almost replaced Batista with Mark Jindrak in 2003. But anyway, this was a great episode, and a lot of people, first of all, Evolution is synonymous with the Ruthless Aggression era. For right or for wrong, for better or for worse, I loved Evolution. I can see why a lot of people say that the 02 to 05 era, where they dominated Raw, was kind of a dark period for the show, just because, Evolution was great, but it was all about Triple H. Constantly. It really was his reign of terror as World Heavyweight Champion from the moment they introduced that title in 02 up until he finally dropped it in April of 05 to Batista. It wasn't one 3-year reign, of course, but he would win it and then lose it, win it, lose it constantly over the course of those 3 years to the point where people were sick of seeing him in that top main event spot. But overall, though, Evolution was very successful, not only in creating new stars out of Orton and Batista, but also out of reinventing, also in the sense that it reinvented Triple H and kind of gave Ric Flair's mojo back, which they talk in great depth about on this episode. So the first person that we hear from after the quick intro about Evolution on this edition of Ruthless Aggression is Brian Gewirtz. He's the first person we hear from. And he said that the Triple H character and storyline had seen some shit from like the Hunter Hearst Helmsley days to becoming the DX leader to everything else he did prior to Evolution in 02. He was in his prime in 2001. Bruce Pritchard called him the Ric Flair of that time, and Triple H praised Ric Flair as the ultimate showman. Ric Flair returned to WWE, as it was mentioned in the initial episode of the show, in 2000. They said 2002 here, but it really was 2001. I think he came back the night after Survivor Series, when he, bought Raw. Not bought Raw, he wasn't Donald Trump, but he was, running Raw with Vince, and they were, co-owners of the show for a while, and then he ran Raw while Vince ran SmackDown after the initial brand split. So he was an authority figure, but he was also wrestling in the ring as an active competitor after WrestleMania. And they talked about how he kind of struggled to reignite the fire that made him great in the first place, and that he kind of felt lost at the time. He admitted as such in this mini documentary here. And Triple H even said, as a big fan of him growing up, I felt that he was just playing Ric Flair. He wasn't even himself anymore. He was out there playing a character. He couldn't even go out there and be the Ric Flair that we all know and love, because he wasn't feeling it anymore. And Triple H saw that he was losing his confidence. And Ric Flair even outright said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to do it. He said he could deal with the aches and the tears and everything else physically. Mentally, though, he felt like because he was getting older, he didn't feel like Ric Flair anymore. He wasn't the Ric Flair of old. It wasn't the Ric Flair of 1992 when he was in the company the first time a decade earlier. He was coming in at the twilight. I say twilight, but he went on to wrestle another 10 years in the company and then later on in TNA. But he was in the back half, not even the back quarter, the last few years of his in-ring career. So of course he's going to feel that way, but it killed Triple H to see Ric Flair down on his luck like that. He even admitted, Ric Flair did, that he wrestled matches where he couldn't feel his hands because he had constant anxiety attacks during his matches. How crazy is that? So Triple H's goal was to get Ric Flair back to where he could and should be, so they formed a friendship out of that. He said that Ric Flair was a complete mess at that point, in 2002. And he felt that the only way to get him back on track was for him to be beside him on on television in order to get his mojo back. And I think they kind of incorporated the fact that he was losing his mojo on TV into a storyline. Because I remember, not that I was watching at that point, but I've gone back and seen footage and whatnot, that Ric Flair and Triple H were actually kind of started out feuding before Triple H convinced Rick, like, listen, dude, you might as well just join me. If you can't beat him, join him. So that's when they became the initial, the seeds were planted for what Evolution would become. Triple H also made it quite clear at that point to Vince McMahon that he wanted a group. He wanted something along the lines of Four Horsemen. And DX was great, but they weren't wearing suits. It wasn't kind of up Ric Flair's alley. So Ric Flair was also interested in the idea. Vince was not. He is not very high on stables, Triple H said. He didn't say past tense. He didn't say, oh, Vince didn't like stables. Even today, I guess he said present tense. Vince does not like stables. For a guy that doesn't like stables, it feels like we have a hell of a whole lot of them between, I know, Undisputed Eras and NXT, but we have like New Day on the main roster. We had the Wyatt family for a long time. We had Sanity for a cup of coffee. A lot of other factions. We have kind of Corbin right now with Rude and Ziggler, and I feel like there's more I'm not thinking of, but obviously the Rollins one on Raw currently. For a guy that doesn't like factions, it feels like we get a lot of them. I mean, granted, they're not always well booked, but that's a whole other issue for another time. We heard from, I think it was Brian Gewirtz, who had said that, maybe JBL actually. JBL had said, it was great for Triple H to be working with Ric Flair on TV, but that pairing put pressure on Triple H because he had to live up to expectations and having the greatest of all time right beside him at all times. So around this time, Randy Orton had been down in OVW for about a year and a half. He got a phone call from good old Jim Ross Jr., who had said, hey, we're ready to move you on up to the main roster full-time. Orton admitted he was excited but nervous, as any normal person would feel. Within a matter of months, he moved from SmackDown to Raw, and maybe not in his first Raw match, but in one of his first Raw matches. He had a match against Christian or a tag team match, whatever. He was wrestling Christian when we saw the footage. His shoulder popped out of his socket. So we had to get surgery on that. He was out for a couple months. But instead of leaving altogether, Bruce Pritchard admitted, he was like, hey, instead of reintroducing Randy Orton months later after he takes time off, why not keep the momentum going? Not that he was extremely over in the first place, but they could have allowed him to maintain whatever momentum he had and maintain a presence on programming through the RNN updates. I haven't seen a ton of them. I saw the one at Survivor Series 02 where he was talking about the flight attendant, and they came across as cheesy and horrible. Orton said as much in his little interviews here. But that's what works in WWE, cheesy and horrible. And it got him over as a heel because he cut a babyface promo. He cut a babyface promo on Raw the first night that he did it. And the Montreal crowd just booed him out of the building. They did not care. So I'm not sure if it was intended to be a babyface promo. It sounded like it was, and then they just turned it into a heel thing. A la Kurt Angle, as opposed to forcing it down people's throats. They immediately turned the switch, realized it was working as a heel gimmick, and created the RNN updates. So we gained traction with those. In the meantime, Batista was also called out to the main roster. Like a month after Orton was, he joined SmackDown, I think in May of 2002. He was kind of confused as to what his status was with the main roster because he was told to come on in. He had no idea what was going on. He was told to buy a $500 suit. And he was like, he kind of made it sound like it wasn't that much money now. Hey, that's it. That's a lot of money even by today's standards. I know the guy's a fucking millionaire and that's like chump change to him now, but like $500 for a suit is a lot of money, especially if you don't have a lot of money like he didn't at that point. And they ripped the arms right off the suit for this Deacon Batista gimmick where he was paired with Reverend Devon from the get-go on SmackDown. The only real saving grace of this, he says, was that it allowed him to learn from Devon. And he had fun with Devon, but the gimmick itself sucked. He said he hated the gimmick. It just wasn't working. It wasn't him. It was stupid. He thought he was going to lose his job on multiple occasions, and as a result, he got lost in the shuffle. Going back to Orton, he was finally cleared to compete again. He said that, they were, when I say they, I'm talking about like JBL, Pritchard, Gewirtz, whatever. They said that he had every tool to be successful. He had every tool to be a top talent in WWE. And he came across like that, that he knew that he would be a star. Ric Flair even said as much. He's like, he had that je ne sais quoi about him. He had that charisma. He had that, he had that, kind of aura about him where he felt like he was a bigger deal than he actually was. And as a result, people saw him as a big deal. It's that same charisma that Flair had to a certain extent, and now Orton had that too. So he was an immediate fan of Orton when he was introduced to him in 2002. And it was very obvious, they said, that Orton was the guy. It was very obvious that he was the guy they were going to build around. Meanwhile, Batista was hungry. He wanted it. Both guys were very giddy about being paired with Triple H and Ric Flair, which was their idea. They scouted Batista. They scouted Orton. They said, oh, how do you feel about this guy? What about this guy? Blah, blah, blah. They ultimately settled on Orton and Batista. And it was Arn Anderson, Triple H said, that came up with the Evolution name because, Triple H was kind of the present at that point, Flair the past, and Orton and Batista the future. So anyway, Triple H told Batista and Orton right from the get-go, listen, you're going to be hated. Like, you're two newcomers, you're getting this immediate push, people will resent you. So as long as you know that right from the get-go, you're either going to make a lot of money with me, or if you want to go make friends, you can't be a part of the group. And they both accepted. They're like, yeah, we would rather make money. Like, it's a natural thing for other people to be jealous that may have been there for a long time that weren't getting those same opportunities. They were running with Ric Flair and Triple H. How could people not hate these two backstage, And they experienced that during their time in Evolution. They got, not bullied or hazed or whatever, I don't think anyway, from what they said. But they were, hated on, for lack of a better term, quite a bit. They were resented quite a bit by the rest of the locker room, who didn't like the fact that they just kind of waltzed right in and got those opportunities. A lot of those people did not think that they were going to make it, that they didn't deserve that push. Batista said he felt like he had a lot of animosity. He felt a lot of that animosity at that point. And Orton even said, hey, I didn't have many friends, but I would rather make money, and it worked out for the better. Triple H was like, he's the type of person where if you're going to hate me, I will give you a reason to be angry. I will give you a reason to hate me. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. And he wanted them to not give a fuck either. Batista even said, most of the guys who didn't like me were assholes anyway. I thought that was a great line. You can use that for anything, I guess. Most of the guys who didn't like me were assholes anyway. I thought that was awesome. So anyway, they had a match on Raw against, who was it? It was like a makeshift tag team. They faced the Dudleys the week later or like the following month or whatever. But they had a match on Raw, like their first real match as a team in February of 2003 after they officially came together on TV. And Triple H was pissed. The match sucked. Both guys forgot everything they were working on. Triple H told Batista, listen, dude, whatever you learned up to this point, forget all about it. We're going to have you start over. We're going to hit that reset button. You're just going to have to start over. For Orton, don't goof off. You have the tools. You can go in the ring, but, don't get a big head about things. And they both did the exact opposite. Batista fucked up. Orton was goofing around. It was a total mess. Then they had he told them, like, listen, if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm going to boot both of you guys right now. We're going to have to start over if you guys don't, get your shit together. So then they had another match where it was even worse. It was a complete disaster. 3 guys injured in one match. I can only imagine how, how the dirt sheets blew up at this point after hearing what happened in this match. So Batista and Orton had a tag team match on Raw with the Dudley Boys. And there's a lot of conflicting reports as to what happened in the match. We hear from Orton, we hear from Batista, we hear from Devon, we hear from Bubba too. They have a lot of Bubba on this episode. So Bubba and Batista have different stories as to how Batista's triceps just blew up, like they just got torn immediately. Batista's side of the story is that Bubba was running at him, and that Batista put up his hands and he squashed his triceps. Bubba's interpretation of it was that he was punching him, he face-palmed him or whatever, and then when Batista did it back to him, he tore his triceps. So there's some conflicting, sequence of events here from both guys. And then Bubba accidentally shattered Orton's ankle because Orton's foot was behind him by accident. I guess they were doing a move where, Devon had one leg of Orton's, Bubba had the other, and then Orton's leg somehow ended up behind Bubba. So when Bubba fell down, he shattered Orton's ankle like immediately. And then Bubba hurt his back from that too. And there was a lot of chaos backstage over the injuries. Triple H was running through the back after someone told him, hey, Randy's hurt. Batista ran through holding his triceps. He's like, hey, I got hurt. And Triple H is like, oh, I heard that Randy got hurt. Not you. And he was like, no, Randy got hurt too. I'm hurt as well. And then Bubba was fucking chewing out Orton, he said. Batista said that Bubba was chewing out Orton for getting him hurt, for hurting his back. And just a lot of animosity between these guys. I never knew there was that much heat between Batista and Bubba Ray Dudley, but now we know. Bubba said that he recalls the conversation. He does not recall yelling at Orton. He said that he may have, but he doesn't remember outright doing that. And then Batista said that Bubba was always a dick to both of them. And Bubba just was like, he was very nonchalant about it. He was like, accidents happen, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But I thought that was interesting. So because both guys got hurt and they were going to be out for a significant period of time, Batista was constantly afraid for his job. He thought he might be fired because that push was over. Both guys got hurt, not just one, both. And Brian Gewirtz called it a gut blow to Evolution. So Orton came back a lot sooner than Batista did. He came back in May of 2003. That immediately created a sense of urgency for Batista to get back. Because if Orton was back and not Batista, that either allowed them to go with a three-man group or to replace Batista in the meantime, which is exactly what they did. And Batista was out a lot longer than he should have been because he accidentally re-injured the triceps while he was training to come back. So that set him back another few months. So it was around this period that Batista heard all the rumors running rampant. And I thought, before we go any further, I thought this happened while they were putting together Evolution, not while they were already together. This happened in 2003 after Orton had already come back, not when they were putting the group together in late 2002, early 2003. This was like mid-2003. I did not know that. Maybe they said that in that Triple H doc and I just completely forgot, but no, this happened already after Evolution was already a thing with the four guys. Batista got hurt. They were looking to replace him. So what happened was they were looking at Mark Jindrak as a potential replacement. And Orton was already tight with Jindrak, whatever his fucking name was. They were already tight behind the scenes. It kind of worked out well. He had a good look. He was crazy athletic. He was a really good worker. But we hear from Mark here too, which I think is awesome. We hear from Jindrak. And he said, listen, I was too young. I was too stupid. I never really realized the opportunity that I had in front of me. And it just didn't work out. Triple H said that he never really took the business seriously, and Orton was well worse off whenever Jindrak was around. Like when they would ride together, Triple H said that he hated Mark Jindrak because he was always making Orton goof off and just be dumb and just be disrespectful, whatever. So they did these, shots walking down the street, whatever. And first of all, Triple H even said, I don't want Jindrak riding with us ever again. I do not want him traveling with us. I don't want him traveling with Orton, and I don't want him traveling with me. He's done. So Mark Jindrak finds out that he has to bring a suit to some shoot they were doing with Orton, with Triple H, and with Batista. Triple H is like, listen, I don't want him in the group, Vince. Let's not go any further with this. And Vince said, no, I like the look. I like the chemistry that he has with you guys. Let's at least try this out. So they did a couple like Reservoir Dog shots where they're walking down the street with their suits on. They did a few with Jindrak, and then they did a few without him, only with Orton, Orton, Ric Flair, and Triple H. So that kind of told Orton right then and there, like, okay, they're considering not putting him in the group, and that's exactly what happened. They kind of filmed that stuff with the intention that they may not, put him in the group, and that's why they filmed the stuff without him. So he was told by Vince right before a Raw on June 23rd that he was going to not be a part of Evolution. That's not the direction they were going in at that time. And that he would be paired off with Garrison Cade instead. And he even said that Triple H, whoever made that ultimate decision not put him in the group, that being Triple H, that was all his influence, he made the right call because it would not have worked out. It would have been detrimental to Orton's growth as a performer, even more so than he already was because Orton was already a goofball. And it sucked for Orton because, he was good friends with Mark and he wanted to work with him in the group, but we understood why Triple H vetoed against it. Like, he was very much against the idea of having him in the group because him and Orton were just a disaster together behind the scenes. And he just never took things seriously. He was very impressive, but because he kind of squandered that opportunity, he kind of floundered for the remainder of his WWE career up until he was fired probably in 2005, 2006, I don't remember. But he did not last long in WWE after that initial Evolution tryout did not go well for him. So Batista ended up coming back on October 20th on an episode of Raw, attacking Goldberg as the bounty. I think there was a bounty on Goldberg because Triple H was feuding with him at that point, and Batista answered that bounty, took out Goldberg, and Evolution was riding high once again. And he said that they believed in him enough to wait until he was ready to come back and not replace him, not kick him out permanently. They were ready to, run with him as the fourth member of the group, which is the exact opposite of sanity now that I think about it. I mean, Evolution and sanity are two totally different things. But like when you think about late 2016, not Alexander Wolf, who was the other guy? Madman Fulton right now at Impact. What the fuck was his name? Sawyer Fulton. He was the original fourth member, obviously, of Sanity. And he was around for a couple weeks at least. I don't know when he got hurt. Early 2017, maybe? Maybe late 2016? I remember seeing him at an NXT house show in November of 2016. So he was around for at least a month or two before he got hurt. And he was definitely hurt by the end of 2016 because NXT wasted no time because they immediately brought in Killian Dane as the next member of the group. Fulton, not only didn't he, get put back with Sanity, he just got released. So that really sucked for him. So had he not gotten hurt, Killian Dane may have never been a part of Sanity, which didn't make or break his career. But it did suck for Fulton, who's now an Impact and doing well. But that's how those injuries, and it's not fair at all. But that's the shit that happens. They have to continue moving forward, and Triple H was adamant about having Batista in that group, and they waited, and it worked out. And look what happened as a result. So, anyway, so they won all the gold at Armageddon 2003. Triple H won the World Heavyweight Championship in the main event, beating Goldberg and Kane in a triple threat. Batista and Ric Flair, I think, knocked off the Dudley Boys in a gauntlet match to win the World Tag Team titles. And then Orton beat Rob Van Dam to win the Intercontinental Championship. So it was a really cool sight for all four guys to be holding gold. And they were supposed to be heels. They were supposed to be anti-heroes, but it didn't really work because people loved them. It was a great group. They were successful. They were very well booked. They didn't really do a lot to elicit boos, which was kind of, an issue, but they were a great group, so people loved them. They were super over. All four guys were thriving. Ric Flair was back. He had his mojo come back. Batista was coming into his own. Orton was the legend killer. They were firing on all cylinders. And I love that they touched on this next thing, The Rock coming back, returning in 2004 for WrestleMania 20. So Rock, I guess, told Vince, the company, whatever, that he was only going to come back for something big. And that kind of confused Mick. Like, he said he would only come back for something big. Why is he teaming with me against Evolution? And I think, I don't know, whoever it was, Brian Gewirtz, whatever, he told him, hey, Rock thinks this is big. This is big to The Rock, to be teaming with you against these up-and-comers. I mean, not really Ric Flair, but to be doing this match at WrestleMania, which is pretty cool. So anyway, it was crazy for Batista, he said, to be in the ring with The Rock, which was, huge for him to be able to beat The Rock. He didn't pin him. Orton pinned Mick Foley to win the match. But it was huge for The Rock to elevate everyone in there. I mean, not really, Ric Flair and Foley, but it really elevated Batista and Orton and solidified them as big stars, as stars on the rise, if nothing else. And I still say that is one of the most underrated WrestleMania matches of all time. That is such a good match. And, The Rock did not have to come back to do that run. He didn't, it wasn't months in the making. I mean, the Foley feud was, not the Rock thing. He didn't stick around after that. It was a one and done. So for what that match was and what it accomplished and how entertaining it was, that's pretty cool. They were able to pull that off, the Rock and Sock connection versus the Evolution. That's pretty freaking cool. So anyway, they move on from that with Orton being, they kind of discuss him as being the undisputed future of the WWE. There was no denying that he was going to be the guy that they were going to build around as the crown jewel of that company. And ultimately, he did win the World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam 2004, beating Chris Benoit. For those wondering, do they show Benoit? Yeah, for a split second they do. Obviously, they don't mention him by name, but they show Orton hitting him with the RKO, and that's the only sight that you see of Orton, or rather of Benoit in this match. You don't even see Orton pinning Benoit to win the World Heavyweight title, which they've shown before on WWE TV, but they didn't even show that here. So, I don't know if there's any hope, but for anyone hoping for an episode of the show where they talk about Chris Benoit and how that tragedy happened at the end of the Ruthless Aggression era, even though I kind of say it ended in 05, in their mind it ends around 07, 08. There's zero hope of that. I don't think there's like probably negative 20% chance of that actually happening. If they didn't mention Benoit here by name, there's no shot of them doing an entire episode on Benoit and what happened with him. I mean, again, that's not really storyline based, but in a lot of ways, that was what ended the Ruthless Aggression era for a lot of people. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point. So he wins the World Heavyweight Championship. He gets betrayed by Evolution the next night. Gewirtz talked about how fans were not really clamoring for a babyface Randy Orton as World Heavyweight Champion. It was cool to see him as World Champion, but he got over as a heel. People could tell that he wasn't a natural face, that he was just a natural asshole, that he was just a glorious prick, as Brian Gewirtz called him. And they didn't really buy into him in that role. It didn't help that he was booked like shit on TV. He lost the World Heavyweight Championship within a month. He just was not ready for that spot. Orton said that he was like, I was not ready for that. Mark Henry said that he let all the success go to his head. And then, Orton's reign was over by the following month. Triple H beat him back for the belt at the 2004 Unforgiven pay-per-view. And they tried to put him in chase mode in the remaining months of 2004, but it didn't really work. So that was when the build began for Triple H and Batista instead. And Vince was like, he really wanted to capitalize on the reactions that Batista was getting by doing the match immediately. But they had a lot of disagreements, Batista said, because Triple H was of the mindset, listen, if we drag this out and make people want to see it, it'll mean that much more if we do it at WrestleMania. So he really wanted to stretch it out, do it at Mania, which is exactly what they did. Batista won the Rumble. The whole angle paid off for that great contract signing on Raw right before WrestleMania 21. On that same show, on the same WrestleMania show, Orton faced The Undertaker at WrestleMania 21, which proved that WWE was still very much invested in Randy Orton. That was right after he went back to being a heel, which has always been the best role for him by far. It made Orton look as good as he could, Taker made Orton look as good as he could. The crowd was even buzzing before the Batista Triple H match, not in like a Rock Hogan type of way, but like in an eerie silent type of way, not in a bad way, but in the sense that holy shit, we're finally ready to see these two guys go at it, And a lot of people backstage did not think Batista was going to make it, but he did. He won the World Heavyweight Championship. I really enjoyed that match that he had with Triple H that night. It wasn't as good as the Hell in a Cell match a couple months later, but it was still very good. Batista broke down afterward, which I already knew. He talked about that in his documentary 10 years ago. But he said he broke down in tears afterward, and he said he was crying for the next 3 days. I think he actually proposed to his wife, Angie, after that. He didn't mention that here because they've since been divorced, and they have been divorced for a long time now. But he actually proposed to his wife after that, which was interesting. Anyway, so Triple H made him a star. He was, forever in debt to Triple H, which ended up paying off at WrestleMania 36, when, not 36, 35, last year, when Triple H retired Batista, and Batista finally put him over after Triple H had never beaten Batista before in his career. And, Triple H says that the group just worked. They overcame injury, they overcame uncertainty, with Batista potentially being replaced, which he wasn't, but there was that thought there for a while. It gave Orton a lot of opportunities. Evolution did to become the superstar that he is today. Ric Flair had a lot of fun doing it. And Triple H even said that it was one of the flagpoles of the Ruthless Aggression era and that it benefited everyone. Not one person, not two people, but everybody. Ric Flair, Triple H, Batista, and Randy Orton. And that was it for this episode of the show of Ruthless Aggression. I thought this was great. I really, really enjoyed this. Again, I'm a big Evolution mark, so I enjoyed this episode a lot. A lot of this we have heard before. I mean, all these guys have documentaries, so you've probably heard this story a million times about Mark Jindrak and stuff like that. I heard it for sure in Triple H's documentary. They talked about in Orton's documentary, Ric Flair's documentary, Triple H's, Batista, Orton, whatever. They talked about it in everyone's documentary. I'm surprised Evolution in and of itself doesn't have a DVD at this point, doesn't have a documentary to itself, but this is basically what that was. It was a documentary of Evolution. And it was really, really good. So if you're a big Evolution guy, even if you're not, I strongly recommend that you check out this episode of Ruthless Aggression, much like the first two. Again, it's the longest one yet. It's an hour and 5 minutes, significantly longer than the other two, which were 40 and 50 respectively. This is an hour and 5 minutes. That's a long time, but it's well worth it. They cover a lot of ground, as they should have, because there was a lot to get into between four guys over the span of 3 years. So, thank you guys, as always, for checking out the video. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back here tomorrow. So what I'm currently planning on is doing a review of not only myself, but maybe Alexis too, of us eating the newly acquired WWE ice cream bars that we bought, that she found. I got to give her credit. Although I was the one that initially looked for them. I was the one that remembered, but she found them. The WWE ice cream bars tomorrow right here on the channel. So keep an eye out for that. It might not be up until later on in the day. But that should be up tomorrow. Wednesday, hashtag AskGSM. Thursday, WrestleRant radio excerpts. Friday, Season 2, Episode 5 review of Ms. and Mrs. Saturday, SmackDown review. Sunday, WWE 24, the R-Truth documentary airs actually, I think, before Super Showdown on Thursday. I probably won't have a chance to watch it until either later on that day, if not Friday. I won't be able to watch it until then. So my review definitely will not be up until Sunday. So it's going to be a little delayed, but that should be a great doc. I'm reviewing that on Sunday. The next Monday, again, my Ruthless Aggression review. Season 1, Episode 4. I don't know what it's focusing on, but I'm looking forward to it. The show has been great so far. So again, guys, thank you for checking out the video. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new WWE Ice Cream Bar review, so keep an eye out for that. Turn your notifications on if you haven't already. And yeah, just have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.